Great. Thanks, Emma. Thanks everyone for joining, especially considering it is a super sunny and hot day where I am anyway, at least in Halifax. Just let me know in the chat right now where you're tuning in from across the province. Just very curious to see where folks are in Nova Scotia, and if anyone happens to be outside of Nova Scotia and are here, just curious to let me know. All right, here we go. Flooding in. I think I saw London, UK in there. That's great. Um, so we're international now. Anyway, thanks for joining. We have a lot of folks here excited. We're going to dive right in. We're going to save some time because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions that come up. So I want to save some time for those questions. I have my colleague here, Edward, who's going to join in for some of the questions at the end, and we're excited to dive right in. All right. All right. We're going to jump right into an activity. How fast can you finish this maze? Get from start to finish. Let me know in the chat when you're done. All right. 20 seconds. A lot of folks are coming in. That's great. All right. Time's up. Hopefully you solved it something similar to this. This is probably the most effective route if you're going in without any backtracking here. So hopefully this looks similar to how you finished it. But curious, did anyone take this approach? Go all the way around? No, probably not. Anyone do this? Jump right to start to finish? Just ignored all the boundaries in the maze? This is what I like to call first principles thinking. It's about breaking down complex problems into the most basic foundational truths and reasoning up from there. So I presented you with a picture of a maze, and you assumed you had to go through the maze because that's how we're conditioned. We see a maze, we know how these work through problems as a child or as a growing up, and so we know how to navigate. We know walls mean boundaries, that we can't go through those. But in some cases, at least in business and in work, those walls are imaginary. They're just the way we've always done things. And especially now with the advent of AI and AI agents, where we normally would have to navigate between these boundaries, there's a lot of shortcuts and different ways to approach work and processes and different thinking. So first principles thinking is breaking down complex problems into the most basic foundational truths and then reasoning up from there. So to put this in, in a business that you might recognize, SpaceX. Traditional thinking, rockets are extremely expensive, historically hundreds of millions of dollars per launch. Conventional thinking, space travel is inherently expensive and only governments can afford it. If we look at first principles thinking, a rocket is just a collection of raw materials, aluminum, titanium, copper, etc. The total cost of materials for a rocket is far less than the final price tag. The challenge is rockets weren't reusable, very, very expensive, and you have to considerable amount of money every single launch. So what SpaceX did is they used first principles thinking and said, can we design rockets from scratch using cheaper materials, using vertical integration, holding the whole supply chain, focused obsessively on reusability. So actually catching rockets as they landed to be able to reuse most of it. And so they were able to reduce the launch costs more than 10 times the compared to NASA's space shuttle. I think I did a little Trailer Park Boys slip there. I said NASA. So that's first principles thinking in a nutshell. So we need to look at some of our own businesses, our own processes, our ways of thinking of work, and how do we rebuild it from the ground up, knowing that there's a brand new technology out there that will challenge the way that work is done. Very quick introduction. My name is Robert Newcomb, founder and CEO of AI First Consulting. We have a small team of 3 right now, and we are growing. And as far as I know, we're the only Atlantic Canadian firm that's 100% focused on AI integration, whether it's generative AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, or AI agents, which we're going to speak more about today. So traditionally, transformation technologies usually follow a top-down diffusion path, originating with government here on the left, working its way to corporations, and then working its way to individuals. So if you think of tools and technology such as electricity, flight, computers, and internet, everything is kind of, very large, expensive investment, starting at governments, and then they filter its way down. Generative AI is a little bit different. Back in November 2023, overnight, ChatGPT 3.5 was released to the general public. At that point in time, you didn't even need to pay for an account. You could just use it right out of the box. And it didn't go through government. It didn't go through business first to test it. It was right in the hands of individuals. And I think they crossed 1 million users, in record time. It was a couple days compared to any other tool or technology that came before it. So businesses and government now have to play catch up. A lot of times when we're talking about generative AI, use cases or examples, folks are talking about, recipes at home or troubleshooting equipment or hardware. The personal use cases are almost easier because we're not being told how this technology works for us. So it's very different in its approach, and it is very much a struggle for a lot of businesses to figure out how it fits in the business, because it's almost backwards compared to traditional technology and how it's been deployed. I don't know if folks are familiar with Microsoft's annual work trend index. So every year they release it. They've been doing it for 5 years now. The first two indexes were focused very much on hybrid work, coming out of the pandemic. And unsurprisingly, over the last 3 years, it's been solely focused on AI. So in 2023, the index was titled, Will AI Fix Work? In 2024, it's AI at Work is Here. Now comes the hard part. 2025 is titled The Year the Frontier Firm is Born. So there's a big emphasis coming into this year. Everyone's talking about 2025 as the year of AI agents. And we'll see if that comes true or not, but it's definitely top of mind, and it's been a lot more communication behind AI agents. What businesses are starting to understand now, that intelligence is on tap. Basically, intelligence is almost becoming a commodity now that you can access ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude at a moment's notice and get almost any type of information that you need. So it's going to rewire businesses entirely. Every leader needs a new blueprint. And one of the things that is transforming is AI agents. So right now, a lot of folks that are using AI are using it as an assistant. So using ChatGPT or Copilot to help them work better and faster, kind of as this assistant, this kind of chatbot interface. We'll be moving into human agent teams. So where agents are more like digital colleagues, humans will give them tasks, they will execute and come back, and we'll be growing with that. We see more and more digital workers or digital colleagues in all different types of industries at work. So I'm going to give some background to what AI agents are and how they work. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. It might get lost there, but definitely hold your questions until the end, and we'll dig through this a little bit deeper. So in plain language, what an AI agent is it's a digital worker that can understand instructions and take actions to complete tasks. So unlike basic automation tools that you may have used before, Zapier, Make.com, Power Automate, and Microsoft, agents can adapt to new situations and learn from interactions over time. So they're not necessarily rules-based. If this, then that. They can think through and reason and act accordingly. So every agent has these 5 components. They have access to a large language model. You can think of this as the AI agent's brain. So the 3 most common models for AI agents, you have OpenAI's model O3, Google has Gemini, and Anthropic has Claude. There's other models and companies out there, but those are the big 3, I guess. 2 is it has memory, so it knows where it is in the process and can remember things and pull things previously to help with executing on tasks. 3 is prompting. So just like ChatGPT or any other AI tool that you use where you have to give it a prompt or some instructions to get feedback, get a response. AI agents work the same way. So you can think of prompting as instructions for the brain or the large language model. So these could be like standard operating procedures. The more autonomous the agent is, the less precise you need to be in these instructions, but it comes in different level, and this is how they operate. Um, Four is external knowledge. So not everything is going to be laid out in your prompt. There will be many times where the agent needs to access external knowledge to know what actions to take. And number five, and probably the biggest thing, is tools. So this is the action part of the agent. So it needs to have access to tools to send emails, to update systems, to use voices. So leveraging APIs, it's able to access these tools, take action. Where right now, if you look at ChatGPT or these tools, they're not really taking action. They're just giving you a response, whether it's in words or text or images or charts, for example. So agents are very similar to humans in how they process and go through tasks. In order for it to be an agent, it needs to act autonomously with minimal human input. So the way that these agents operate can be described through four letters, or the SPAR framework: sense, plan, act, and reflect. So first we have sense. AI agents are actually actively perceive and understand information from various sources. So they can process text, they can analyze images, interpret data, comprehend natural language requests. So they can kind of consider all of this before they take action. Second is plan. Agents strategically map out solutions to achieve goals. So similar to how humans break down complex problems into manageable steps, agents will do the same thing. They'll understand the request and break it into actions, sequence it, and figure out how to handle potential obstacles. The third is act. So unlike traditional AI systems, agents execute actions in digital environments. So just as we move from thinking to doing, agents are translating plans into concrete actions. And then fourth is reflect. Agents learn from their experiences to continuously improve, very similar to humans. So what makes this powerful is it's not just a linear sequence, it's a continuous cycle. So each time an agent will go through this framework, it will learn from it and continuously get better if that's programmed within the agent. So as one example, think of an AI customer service agent. It receives a support ticket about a billing issue. So it senses the problem, it understands and reads through the ticket, it accesses the customer's account information, it plans a solution by determining the necessary steps to resolve the discrepancy. It then acts and will update the billing system, and maybe it will generate a corrected invoice. And then finally, it can reflect on the solution and whether it was successful and whether the records are updated accordingly. So we're changing now from AI being passive tools to very much proactive teammates. So this is where the revolution is coming. A lot of the AI agents now are very narrow in focus and can't do work in many different areas. But you can spin a lot of these up and they can help execute and automate many different tasks that couldn't have been done before the advent of large language models. There's basically two types of AI agents that can be built. The first is conversational agents. So you can think of these as human interaction. Just like you'd see a chatbot on a website, you're talking to that chatbot, and it's not just pre-programmed responses, it's actually understanding what you're asking for. It's accessing external information or different knowledge sets. It's looking at its systems. Maybe it has a booking system and it's trying to find your name within that system. So it can access all of these different tools to give a response that's not just a pre-programmed typical chatbot response. Other types of agents are automated agents. So these would be triggered by a type of event, so not human chat. So it could be an email that comes in, a form submission, or a calendar request. It kind of puts the agent into motion. So it would look into these items, it would understand the information that's coming through these automations, and then take the appropriate action. So in order for these to be considered AI agents, it must use some level of understanding and access a large language model. It's not just running off of pre-programmed logic of if this, then that. So you think of AI agents in five different levels. It's kind of similar to autonomous or self-driving cars if you think about the different levels or different stages. So first we have level one, and this really isn't an AI agent. This is just a simple rule-based automation. So if you've used Make.com or Zapier or Power Automate, you have different rules in place. So based on those conditions, it will follow down many different paths. You can think of that as cruise control in your car. So you're very far away from self-driving with cruise control, but it's helping take some of the onus off of the human and automate some of the tasks. The next is intelligent automation. So it combines automation with AI. So this is what a lot of companies are using right now for AI agents. So they're able to, it's similar to cruise control with lane assist. They can combine automation with AI capabilities, but they really operate within rigid parameters. They're very focused on one specific task and very limited use of AI within that task. Level three would be like highway self-driving. It can go on ramps and off ramps. It can navigate traffic and pass cars. They can act semi-autonomously in defined domains. So they can kind of react and have goals, but it's still, a narrow focus. Next, we have level four, and this would be like semi-autonomous agents, like cars that drive themselves under specific conditions. If you've been following the self-driving cars, one of the companies is Waymo. So it's like a self-driving Uber, but it only operates in certain cities. So it can, just like with AI agents, it can understand goals and adapt strategies, but it's still within a specific context. And level five, this is still very much theoretical. It's hard to say if we'll ever get to this level for AI agents, but it'd be like a car that can drive itself in all conditions, rain, snow, hurricanes, road construction, off-road, would act just like a human would. For autonomous agents, digital colleagues, which would have total alignment with human values, would require no oversight at all. It's hard to say we'll ever get here, but there's still a lot of power that can come with agents in different one of these levels. So don't think of this as much as a leveling up or a journey. There's different levels of autonomy here, but there's going to be some use cases where you just want to focus on level one. That rules-based automation is all that you need. You don't need to leverage a large language model or AI reasoning as it. It just has very straightforward rules, and you can use that accordingly. So depending on the solution, depending on the situation, will depend on what level of autonomous AI agents you need. And then as you start to level up in your AI journey, you will start to use AI agents together as agent teams, or what's known as swarms. You can think of a coding example. If you have different folks that are on a coding team, they usually work better if everyone has their own specific role or expertise or experience. So one's focused on planning, one's focused on simulating, one's focused on the actual coding, one's doing a code review or debugging. So you may have heard of the six thinking hats, where we have six different colors, all representing a different role or persona. The same can be done with AI agents. You give it a very specific task, very narrow in focus, but if that can work with other agents and then they can work together, they can collaborate, they can challenge each other just like humans would, you're going to start to see that team network effect. Just like how people work together and get the most working together, the same can be done within AI agents all working together. And we're starting to see that already with some of the new advancements in Claude Code and Cursor and some of these other tools. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the television show Alone. But it's very similar to some of these autonomous AI agents. In this show, people are dropped off in the middle of the woods and they have, very few tools and access to things, and they need to really figure out how to survive out there on their own. So they need to have autonomy and be self-sufficient. So in the show, contestants must survive independently. They're using their knowledge, their tools, their resourcefulness. It's the same way with AI agent systems. They need to operate independently to operate to achieve their goals without human micromanagement. So they can make choices based on their training, based on the parameters, based on the objectives, based on what tools they have access to. They also have to be able to adapt to the unpredictability. So contestants in the show, they face unexpected challenges such as weather or resources or wildlife that might come up. Same with AI agents. There's going to be different things that they get stuck or come across, and they need to be able to evolve and change based on these situations. Resource management in the show, they need to carefully ration food, ration energy, and their time, balancing short-term survival with long-term endurance. AI agents, they need to be better using their resources, their data, their strategies, because without becoming ineffective over time. They have goal-oriented behavior, so participants are highly focused on the ultimate goal, outlasting competitors, winning the competition. Agentic AI is similar, where whatever objectives or goals that you give it, it is going to be very determined to accomplish those with whatever means necessary within its guardrails. And for agents to be, truly autonomous, they should have very minimal external support. So just like in the show, they can access different people or different teams. Agents also work autonomously, solving problems independently. So if you're familiar with that show, that might be a good analogy to understand how these agents operate and how they can become autonomous in their role. So some advantages to AI agents, and some of these are pretty straightforward and obvious, but I think it's worth noting why companies are investing so heavily in this technology. There's a lot of companies, a lot of startups now that are being evaluated tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not over $1 billion for what they can do. Obviously, speed and efficiency. AI agents can process data and perform repetitive tasks much faster than humans. So if you've used deep research in Google Gemini or ChatGPT, you've seen the power and the speed of how quickly you can go through 50 different websites, pull sources from all those areas and bring it together in a report. Availability, these AI agents, they don't tire. They can work 24/7 without breaks, without fatigue, without time off or vacations. So they're very much dependable in that way and can be used at any point in time. Scalability, the task can be scaled up instantly. So one AI agent can handle many interactions simultaneously where we need to be very focused. It can go through things much, much more quicker. Cost reduction. Once these AI agents have been developed and deployed, they cost a fraction of what it would cost to hire and train employees for the same task, especially when you consider turnover, where people will leave for another job. You can see how AI agents can be very attractive for businesses. Data handling, very good at sorting, analyzing, and generating insights from large volumes of data. Can easily be integrated with different softwares, APIs, databases, and automation tools. And then consistency. AI doesn't have necessarily a bad day like a human would. Maybe, went out the night before and is tired at work the day after. They're very much consistent in that way. But there's obviously a lot of challenges with AI agents. And the first and probably the most obvious one is just the lack of judgment. AI agents, these are next word predicting machines. They don't truly understand context or ethics or nuance or emotions like a human can. And there's some use cases where, they can appear very empathetic, but that doesn't mean they are empathetic. They don't have human emotions. They're limited flexibility. So most AI agents struggle when the task requires creative problem solving or they have to adapt to new or unfamiliar outputs or inputs. They're very much trained on a lot of data, and it's almost an average of that data how they are executing. So anything that's very new or novel, it will struggle with. It's very much dependent on data quality. You've probably heard the term garbage in, garbage out. The AI is only as good as the data and the prompts it receives. Transparency and explainability is challenging for all types of generative AI. It's hard to know how it came up with that decision, especially with the complex models. So if you need to understand, it will show its process and planning, but you may not know how it came up with that plan in the first place. So it's hard to really understand where it comes up with. You can ask AI how it came up with the plan, but it's just reverse engineering, and it doesn't mean it's actually true in how it approached the problem. Yeah, so we have trust and adoption. People may resist AI due to fear, misunderstanding. Job security concerns is obviously a big one. So rolling this out in a team, a department, a company can be very challenging. These agents need regular updates, retraining, and oversight. And there's also some security and ethical risks as far as giving full autonomy to these agents to make decisions. We've already seen lots of companies that have gotten into some trouble, whether they're using AI or using an AI chatbot. It kind of goes off the guardrails and says something, and now the company's liable for what came out of that chatbot or what the AI shared. So some real world applications today. And what we'll do is we may be able to demo one or two of these at the end of the presentation if we have time. But one that a lot of folks may be familiar with is deep research. So deep research is a tool that you can get with the Plus subscription of ChatGPT for $20 American a month. You can also access it for free through Google Gemini. You have limited amounts of searches on the free plan. But this is basically an AI agent. So you're giving it a task or a prompt. Here, this example, I said I'm an industrial engineering or I'm an industrial engineer. I want to understand how my role or job is going to change in the next 1 to 2 years because of AI. So here it comes up with a plan. It executes on that plan, does some research. It goes through many different websites. It analyzes what it collects from all that different websites, and then it will give me back a response. So it has these different steps. There's planning involved. It has access to tools, in this case, just different websites, and can bring back that information. So you can imagine for a human to do this, to go check 30 different websites, to know what websites to check, to get that information, pull it back, summarize, analyze, and come up with a conclusion. There's a lot of reports or plans and research that would have taken weeks, potentially have cost tens of thousands of dollars to bring a consultant in to do, can now be done in less than 10 minutes with very, very good accuracy. Microsoft is starting to roll out their own agents within Copilot, so what they call Microsoft Copilot Studio. So just a couple of weeks ago, they announced and released, I think they announced it back in March. They released it just a couple of weeks ago, Researcher and Analyst. So these are two narrow agents which are focused on researching, so basically deep research like Google and Gemini, and then Analyst for going through data, spreadsheets, to create tables, graphs, and give you insights based on the data. The nice thing about Copilot is if you have a Microsoft Office subscription, everything is housed in your enterprise tenant, so you can trust that any data that you're sharing with the model won't be used to train the model, won't be leaving Canadian servers, so there's additional level of security there. They also have Copilot Studio where you can create your own agents. These are less agentic and more like a custom GPT. So they're not usually true agents in the sense of what we described earlier, but can still be very valuable in the work that you're doing. Some other tools out there that you may have heard of before, Clay is one. It's a tool to help enrich your sales data. So it does everything from sales and marketing. And so they talk about 4 different elements that Clay does. It can find information, so it can search the web and look for any sort of competitor analysis or look for clients or leads. It can then enrich that data. So if you have a CRM and you want to gather more information, scraping different websites, for example, it can then transform the data and add more to it. And then you can export it to any one of your systems or databases that you're already using. So it's a subscription model that you can use, and a lot of folks that are in sales are already using this type of tool, which is very much agentic AI. Another tool where you might want to build your own AI agents is called Relevance AI. They have some pre-built agents that you can download and build off of yourself, or you can start from scratch and build out these workflows. So they're enabling anyone to build autonomous AI teams and put their processes on autopilot. Gumloop is another one. So they have some pre-built agents that you can use. So one that they advertise on their website is scraping LinkedIn. So you can see and saving that data into a spreadsheet or somewhere else. So no human oversight needed. A lot of these tools are, again, they have narrow focuses, but can actually execute and take action, where most AI tools today aren't able to do that. Uh, and then finally, we have N8N. So if you're following any type of AI agents on YouTube or through social media of folks building and customizing their own, a lot of them are using N8N, and that's what we use in-house as well. So it's very familiar or similar to make.com or Zapier as far as the UI goes. You're kind of dragging and dropping steps and connecting them and seeing how they integrate. But it's leveraging a large language model to make decisions, to be that brain. You can build access to different tools, access to different external knowledge, and build custom workflows for your own AI agents. So next slide, I have a recorded video. This was done by our AI developer, Edward. I should have shared with sound, so hopefully everyone can hear it. If you can't, try to turn the volume up, or let us know in the chat, and we can kind of explain it over the Q&A.
Into the demo. So for Engineers Nova Scotia Agent, what we have here is a Google Gemini 2.5 flashlight as our LLM. This is the newest model that Google has released. And as we mentioned, in order for an LLM to become an agent, you need to have memory. So here we have used Zep as a cloud-based memory so that the agent or the LLM can write its steps, its conversations, and whatever it has retrieved from previous tasks into it so that it can recall stuff. Next thing that an LLM needs in order to become an agent is an access to different sets of tools. And here we have given it access to a Google Calendar, so it can see all of my events. It has access to Brave search engine through an MCP, so it can look up anything on the internet. And then lastly, on the server that this agent is hosted, it has access to a directory within which it can write files, it can read from files, and also list different files and other directories that are within that directory. Lastly, here you can also see a isolated tool, which is uh, a tool that is actually powered by another LLM. So within this tool, what we have is another LLM that is going to grab all of our meetings that we've had for a specified day. So our agent will specify the date, and we will fetch all of our meetings from our fireflies.ai note taker, and we're going to pass this onto another Google Gemini chat model in order for it to do a recap of a certain day. So we can find out what we have achieved, what we have on the go, etc. And the if statement is in case we have no meetings, it will just report an empty list. Otherwise, it will give us a recap through our Google Gemini model. So let's jump back into our agent and let's have a quick little interaction with it. So let's find out what we have on the go today. So let's ask it what we have on the go today. So when it's executing, we'll actually see it doing the thinking and kind of doing autonomous task execution. Even though we have not specified how it is going to find out what we have on the go today, it was able to realize that it has to go through my Google Calendar to find out what kind of events I have going on and also find out if I've had any meetings and what were the recaps for those meetings. And we can see here that it says that we have one task which is troubleshooting DNS from 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Halifax time, and there were no Fireflies AI recap. Next, let's ask if we can add something to our to-do list. So within our uh, file directory that we have here, we can see that even though I did not specify how it's going to do it or where my to-do list is, it was able to read the contents and figure out that that's where my to-do list lies. And we can also see if it can come up with anything from the internet. So let's see what it can tell us about Nova Scotia or Engineers Nova Scotia. So we can see here that it will figure out to use the Brave search engine and come up with the last thing. And as we found out, there were no meetings, so it was able to go through our Fireflies AI and get our meetings recap. So that's what makes an agent. It has to have memory, it has to have access to tools, it has to be autonomous, so you don't have to specify each task that it has to do. And just to make sure that that's not specified, this is our system prompt for our agent, and all we provide is the date for the day so that it can know how to backdate or forward date something. It has access to a small little knowledge of what its tools are, but no specified sequence of actions that it must take in order to execute a task. And that's what makes an agent. Thank you.
So yeah, if you have any questions about that specific agent or building agents, we have Edward on the line, so we'll save some time at the end. But the capabilities and the possibilities are endless. If you can think of the process of where AI might be able to help with some of the decision making, the executing, it can access the tools, access the APIs, provide some of that information. There's a lot that can be done, and we're just really on the early cusp of building out and deploying agents in business. So a few tips as we're going through this, and if you're thinking about how to integrate this in your business. The first is AI is hard work, but it's the hard work that makes everything else easy. And the technology itself, like leveraging the technology, isn't that complex. We're seeing like high school students and university students, that don't need to be able to code or anything, being able to pull these together. What's really needed is the space and the capacity to use these tools and to dig in. But really, it's not the technology, it's the change. It's a big paradigm shift in the way we do operations and the way we work, thinking about outsourcing and delegating tasks to AI. And the biggest challenge right now that we're hearing from businesses is businesses are just too busy, already putting out fires, already challenged with the demands of the day-to-day work. You really have to carve off the time to go deep, not even just in AI agents, but just, fundamentally how AI can help in the business. There's also an emotional investment with AI. I don't know who's heard of the IKEA effect before, but basically, if we've built it or contributed to it, we take more pride and ownership of it. So you may have a piece of furniture or something in your house that you built and you're more proud of it. Or even at work, maybe it's a Excel spreadsheet or some sort of automation that you use all the time because you were a part of building it or you've co-created it together. Same thing goes with AI and organizations. Folks are going to be more emotionally invested in the technology. Maybe they don't have to build it, but they have to have a say in it and be a part of that process. So whether it's AI agents or just rolling out Copilot or ChatGPT, building it into some of the processes, it's important to bring people along with you on that journey. And a good way to start is I like this saying from Jim Collins. This came from Good to Great, and he talks about firing bullets, then cannonballs. So turn small, proven ideas into huge hits. So starting off very small, so even before AI agents or even your first AI agent, make it something that's very low cost, low risk, and low distraction. So this shouldn't be anything that's customer facing or facing outside of your organization, or even anything that changes a team process. Start something small individually, figure out what works, and then once you get onto something, once you say, oh, wow, look at this personal assistant I built, now we can share that with the rest of the team or the department. So once you have that empirical validation, then you can fire a cannonball. So you can take a lot more resources and put it into that one big bet. So our approach, this AI first flywheel, is very much building onto that, bullets than cannonballs. First, start identify your AI use cases. A lot of organizations get this backwards where they think, okay, what is the best tool, the best technology, the best agent, and then how do we fit that into our business? That's the opposite way. What you want to do is look at what your business does, where your pain points are, where your challenges or bottlenecks are, and start from the ground up. So where are all of the different things that you're doing that might be a good place for AI to help? Once you identify some of the top use cases, you pilot just one. Don't try to boil the ocean. Start with one at a time and pilot it with a small group. Once you pilot it, then you want to standardize that AI workflow, take the lessons learned and kind of incorporate it into your process, document in the SOP. This is the new way of doing this process now with leveraging AI. Then you want to measure and share the benefits. A lot of folks in the organization probably aren't bought into AI or don't understand how it can help. So if you can actually quantify the time saved or the increase in quality, whatever those metrics or outputs are, it's important to share that within the rest of the company. And then from there, hopefully you've actually saved time as a part of leveraging AI. And with that saved time, use it to reinvest and learn more about AI. And then this is a flywheel effect. So the more time that you saved, the more time that you have to identify more AI use cases. And you'll be able to better spot what are the best cases for AI use cases or best cases for AI agents. You'll be able to spot and tell how to do better pilots, how to roll it out better, how to bring people along on that journey. Better methods for standardizing and operating and making sure that it's controlled and sustained, that you don't revert back to the old way of doing things. Making measuring the outputs and outcomes better. You're not going to get it completely accurate the first time, but the more you do this, the better you'll be. And then you'll have better time management and better understanding and better energy to apply back into this AI flywheel. So as you're thinking about, AI agents, you really don't want to build them off on their own. You want to understand how it works within a process. And when we're working with organizations, my background, industrial engineering, Lean Six Sigma, before AI was here, we were doing all sorts of different process improvements. We still do sticky notes on the wall to understand what the current state is. But when we're looking at future state with process improvement and with AI, you can't just look at your bottlenecks and say, okay, I'm going to put AI here, AI here, AI here. You really want to start from scratch, from the ground up, and use a few different techniques such as future backward thinking. Imagine that vivid, ideal future state, what it could be, and then work backwards from that. And you need to have some level of knowledge and understanding of where AI is today and where it's going to be in order to do that. Zero-based process design is basically creating a workflow from a blank slate rather than just like incrementally improving the current state. You're not going to see the big changes there. And this goes back to the first principles thinking. You want to do some assumption busting. You know, we often have these invisible rules, things that are fixed, whether it's policies, roles, data limitations. Try to really push the boundaries and bust those assumptions and understanding the systems thinking about how all of this works together. And where you're going to start is you're going to start by streamlining, making things quicker, better, faster. But as you level up, you'll realize, you know what, we're not doing extra research today because it takes too much time. But if we had an AI agent to do some of that research to enrich the process, we would see better metrics across the board. So it's not just understanding the activities, the bottlenecks, the time, but it's understanding what are those critical to quality points that really help the outcome or the end result of the process and leveraging AI throughout. So the future of AI. Right now, you may have heard, a lot of organizations are talking about becoming AI first, and they've gotten some critical feedback about this, how they rolled it out and how they've communicated it. So Shopify, for example, Canadian company, they talked about being AI first and that they're only going to, before they hire anyone on their team, you need to prove that AI can't do it. Duolingo let out a similar memo a couple weeks after that, saying that they will be slowly They're not going to be firing anyone or laying anyone off, but they have contractors in place, and they're slowly going to be laying off contractors for the work that AI can now do. So a lot of these organizations, whether they're publicly talking about it or not, are trying to think about how they're leveraging AI to be more cost effective, and more productive. It's important to remember that this is the worst AI that you will use. We look back, we think progress is linear. It's not linear at all. It's very much exponential. So, where we're at today, it's only going to get better and better. It may not continue up this exponential slope forever, but they're seeing, as far as how quickly and how cheaply they can build these models, how they can improve upon these models, how they're being deployed, the energy efficiency from these models, everything is kind of following this exponential path. I'm assuming with large language models, it's going to cap out. They're going to need some other AI technology to help. But, this is something that's not slowing down and you'll need to prepare for in the future. Just to wrap up, we follow we have a method, an approach called the AI First Pyramid. When we work with organizations, starting with the foundation, the people, and the policy, this needs to be driven by the leadership. This can't be a bottom-up ground swelling movement. You need support from the top in order for this to be successful. But very much in play, it needs to have leadership. It needs to have some sort of centralized group, what we call the lab, to share information, to stay on top of the research, to do some of the testing, the benchmarking. But it's important technology and tools to be deployed to everyone, all of the labor across the organization. So if you're interested, we have 13 minutes, I think, for questions and answers. We have a QR code here. So if you want a copy of these slides, we'll happily send them out. Just fill out a very quick survey, and we'll send those by the end of the week to you. Also, Edward and I were talking earlier this week, and we think it'd be really cool to do a AI agent demo live and actually build one. So we're looking for feedback, what that should be. So we have a few different options, but you can choose any sort of agent that you want to see, put that in the survey, and then we'll be sure to email you whenever we have that webinar later this summer. All right. Thanks for your time, Emma.
Great. Hey, so we have a couple of questions in the chat as well. Do you want me to read them out to you and you can answer them, or how would you like to go with it?
If you don't mind reading them out, I wasn't staying on top of that, so that'd be great.
Yeah. So your first question is, what is your prediction for the future of AI? Will there be robots doing everything for us while we enjoy the good life, or are we looking at Skynet?
I think that was Steve. So thanks, Steve, for that question. Personally, I'm a little bit more optimistic, but you'll see a lot of different predictions out there. There's a phrase called P-doom, and that's different levels of prediction about things going towards Skynet, relatively very low. But some folks think it might be higher, or more likely. Right now with the technology of large language models, there's some definite things that they cannot do, and where we're not looking at Skynet or anything like that. But my prediction is it's a little bit more optimistic, but we still need to be very vigilant in how these things are rolled out, how we're using these tools, how they're being deployed. It's very much top of mind with these big companies such as Anthropic and OpenAI about how they're safe, how they're doing alignment to making sure these models are aligned with human values, but it's still very much a challenge today. Edward, I'll open that up to you too if you have anything to add.
I share the same view. I don't think it'll be as bad as the predictions are. There's a lot of negativity to this, but I don't think the tech, especially where it's at and the limitations of it, as we're seeing with training and stuff, I don't think it's going to go the Skynet route. I think it's going to be a lot better with the maybe robotic, but mostly for now, we're just going to see a lot of agentic usage.
Great. And sorry, I'm going to put my screen back up. I don't have the link readily available, but I'll put the QR code there for anyone else that needs to access it. And awesome. I see the chat there. So thanks, Evelyn, for doing that behind the scenes. Great.
I'll also just let you know, we do have a number of questions coming in. So if any of these you'd like to answer at a different time, we can also send out the responses as well. But I will continue. Next question is, How would agentic AI affect my organization's net zero plan?
Um, Good question. So, assuming net zero is your environmental emissions as far as how you're using AI, it is something to consider. There are some emissions, there's some electricity usage, there's some water usage that's involved whenever you query ChatGPT. It is very, very minimal. The depending on what sources you look at and who you're listening to, it's very hard because all of these models, they're not sharing uh, the level of detail needed to do these emissions calculations. Through a lot of different research, MIT has a really good article that came out about a month ago or so, doing some more analysis. But basically, you can think of it as like every query you do with ChatGPT is like a 15th of a teaspoon of water. The electricity usage, for 100 queries is less than a minute of using your oven. So if you're looking at comparables as far as like commuting to work or using other events that are high usage of electricity or water, the queries are nothing with ChatGPT. But if you're using agents that are running continuously and consistently, it's something that you'll want to look into and evaluate.
What challenges do you see for professionals where the Hubert will look to AI for professional skill, expertise, and advice, and consider professionals too expensive, i.e., medical, legal, engineering?
Yeah, that's a great point, pal. Yeah, I think what we're seeing now already in different fields is like think of legal and lawyers, for example. There's a lot that you can do with ChatGPT or any of these AI tools to get you 90% of the way there. It can help review contracts, it can help create contracts, but it's still not replacing that subject matter expertise to kind of give that final stamp of approval. So I see different professions, including the engineering profession, where a lot of the grunt work, the administrative work can be done with AI. Maybe not the tools that are available now. There might be some specialty tools that are rolling out with different systems, but you still need that professional engineer to put the stamp of approval on. I don't see that being automated or given to AI anytime soon. So you'll need to have the professionals in place to help make sure these systems are correct, they're accurate, they're aligned, they're not hallucinating, and that's across all different fields. But it will change business models and can really flip businesses on their head. If you think of a per diem model, as far as charging by the hour, what if you can do 10 times the productivity using research or whatever? So I think a lot of businesses are going to have to figure that out themselves about how they handle and approach these technologies and incorporate it into their business.
Your next question is there a method you use to benchmark, double check the output? I was using AI to help with a client's taxes while investigating inside their INC, and an AI made up a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, so with benchmark, there are like public benchmarks available that talk about different models and how good they are in different categories and areas. I think once your business gets serious about AI, you should create your own benchmarks. How do you use AI now? What is the process? What is the output? If a new model comes out, compare it. Because I've heard of a lot of, especially automations breaking or not being near as effective because ChatGPT will introduce a new model and now it doesn't work the same way anymore. So very much customizing benchmarks to your business, to your processes. What does success look like? And then comparing that with different models. So yeah, it's very much needs to be kind of done at your own scale, your own level, your own processes for that matter.
And just to add to that, in terms of the like double checking the output, a lot of times in production, what we do is multiple LLMs that are responsible for different tasks. So instead of having an agent that is responsible for both doing the mathematics, doing the checking tax code, and also putting that into the documents, we have different LLMs that are responsible for only one part of that task. So then you're limiting its ability to hallucinate. So one agent that we know is really good at math, and we have given it calculator tools that are specific to finance, it'll be able to use those tools in order to ensure it. And then we have another agent that checks the output consistently, saying, hey, the math here is not adding up. You should check it again.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And then, yeah, even if you're not using agents, if you get an output from ChatGPT, copy and paste that into Gemini or another tool and say, this is what I got from ChatGPT. You can actually make these models compete against each other a little bit, and it will try hard to try to prove the other model wrong or come up with something. So, yeah, definitely use different models.
Can you talk about the difference between an agent and a custom GPT and when you should use each one?
So for custom GPTs, which we didn't cover today, it's basically like its own instance of ChatGPT. So it has its own, you can give it instructions, you can give it access to knowledge, but it's not autonomous. It has very limited action or available to access tools. So it's great for, repetitive processes. One process that we have is we'll have a call transcript from a meeting. I'll upload the call transcript into a custom GPT. I won't give it any additional prompting, but it has a backend prompt that includes a proposal template. It'll match the transcript to the template and then create a proposal. So it doesn't have to do as much. It's not taking any other actions. It's not accessing any other tools. It's very much a standardized process where it's the same step by step by step. Where you want to use agents where it's different thinking. It might have to access different tools depending on the case, depending on the scenario. So there's a little bit more extra thinking or reasoning involved where you'd use an agent.
Will AI provide footnotes to assess the quality of the information research process?
Yep, most of the tools now provide that out of the box. So whether using ChatGPT or Google Gemini, or if you want to do research, Perplexity is a really good tool. It's like a Google equivalent. Google's a search engine. Perplexity labels itself as an answer engine. But throughout the responses now, they'll add footnotes. So you can hover over the footnote, identify the source that it came from. You can double check that source or go to the source yourself and find it. I ran into a little bit of issue using deep research with ChatGPT. It referenced Reddit in my search, and the Reddit article was 8 years old. So it wasn't relevant anymore. So you do still need to check the sources and fact check and make sure that it is still accurate and relevant.
How do you feel engineering programs should be modified to help prepare our future engineers for AI in the workplace?
That's a big one. I taught a generative AI course at Dal in the winter, and I think we need to teach more about AI in engineering. So not just like the simple uses, but the ethics, the safety, the guardrails, the hallucinations, everything involved with it. Just like different computer tools like email, Excel, CAD tools. I think AI is just kind of this next wave. So I think it does need to be integrated into learning. But right now, we talked about how most things go government, corporations, and individuals. Academia would be high up there as well. They're playing catch up. They're on the back end of this where individuals have it first and they need to adjust their systems. So it is going to take some time. But I do think it is important to start training here. At least that's my personal opinion.
How do you protect your data, and how should both individuals and businesses protect their data slash IP and their employees' data?
So out of the box, like if you're using these tools such as ChatGPT or Gemini, even if you're paying the $20 a month subscription, they have tools in place where they're not training the models, but I would not share any sensitive, confidential information, any private, personal identifiable information. They're not HIPAA compliant, HIPAA, PIPEDA, all of those acronyms. So really limit and don't share any of that type of confidential type of information. So really, you need to have policies in place. You need to have training in place. You need to have some safeguards in place for that as well. But that's why a lot of companies are using Copilot because it is protected in the enterprise. So if your data is aligned in HIPAA compliant, then as a result, SharePoint and Microsoft will be as well for you. And so, I mean, we can dig deeper with that and follow-up question, but basically is you do have to be considerate and careful with what data you're sharing with these models. And Edward, you can probably
Yeah.
explain a little bit more on that there too, but
I think you've encapsulated pretty well. You don't want to share any information with these models that you wouldn't put it out there in the public internet. So if you wouldn't put it, on your OneDrive or Google Drive just to keep it there, you probably shouldn't give it to these models. That's kind of the technique I just go with, because even though some of these models say they're not training on your data, they won't use your data, you're still, if you wouldn't put it out on the public internet and start sharing all of your IP or health information, you probably should not be giving these to those models as well.
We are at 1 o'clock, but there are just 2 questions left if you have the time to
yeah,
answer it, or we can
two
take it
questions.
offline.
Two
Okay.
questions sound great.
I keep seeing sales related to AI agents, but having trouble thinking of examples that are R&D or IT or manufacturing related. Can you go over some hypothetical examples of AI agents that are not sales related?
Edward, do you want to take that?
Um, I don't have like specific to certain industries. I do know that a lot of these large corporations have come up with agents and they're helping with streamline. I know JP Morgan released an article where they were saving 21,000 hours of lawyer hours when they're using these agents to start detecting fraudulent activities within their systems. For manufacturing, you can always do like documentation processing is one of the biggest ones, having agents that can do documentation parsing, answering questions, doing kind of checking if certain product meet certain criteria and certain regulations that you have. Research is a big one. So I know we talked about Perplexity Labs. Research is a huge one. Like if you have market research, business competition, or if you're even doing just competitive, like what kind of products are out there, Perplexity is great for that. It can go through hundreds of different sources and give you all these answers within minutes instead of taking you hours.
Yeah, I think R&D is a pretty good use case and lots of
It's
tools
kind of funny,
available.
relates to the next question, which is I've been hearing a lot about Perplexity AI. Can you please comment on the tool when compared to ChatGPT and others?
Yeah, so Perplexity is basically like more like Google. It's more focused on research and getting information from different websites, but making sure that information is of high quality, and it's very much trained and fine-tuned to be focused with research. So ChatGPT is it's like a Swiss Army knife. It can do anything. It can be very robust. It can do lots of different things with images and data analysis and writing, where Perplexity is very much focused on research. So that's why a lot of people use it for that type of task. Very quick, very high quality. A lot of the different footnotes, so it's a lot easier to check the source and the quality of information. So yeah, if you want to do any sort of research type tasks, I definitely try Perplexity.
Um, there was one person just commented back on their first one about the data, just as expanding. Didn't you refer earlier on that the agents operate within APIs? Are you not giving AI access to Firefly, Slack, Calendar, etc.?
Yes, yeah. So they need access to APIs in order to access the tools and be able to update, read, create, and do those sorts of things.
Yeah, and we just don't give it access to anything sensitive. So there we have built-in security policies that certain meetings that are filtered through, so the agents will not be able to access it. If we're having conversations where clients don't want those meetings being processed, we ensure that we don't have the emails coming through being processed or the meeting notes. We don't give it access to obviously our IP. But this is where you could use Microsoft's Copilot system and build agents and give it access to your IPs through APIs, but it doesn't leave your tenant, so it doesn't go through public internet.
Thank you. Well, that is all the questions that we have now. So thank you both for your presentation and answering the questions at this time.
Great. Thanks, everyone.